U-turn sign on it. And I was like, oh, it's around the corner. And then I went further, and then my timer's going off. It's like 15 minutes into, yeah, it was a hike. And then a guy flew by me on like a 3-wheeled scooter thing, and I was like, I need one of those. Yeah, it's really far, so thank you for making it out here. Well's been to a presentation of mine before at AU Built or saw me online screwing around or something. Some first time in here, cool. So I allow questions the whole time that I'm presenting. So we're going to talk about Revit, generative design, Dynamo, sick memes, all that good stuff. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll work through it. We'll answer it. We do have this as a lunch session, so everyone's eating up, of course, but that means we're limited on time. So we'll try to be respectful of everyone's time. We're gonna have the Lenovo guys come up and talk about all the specs of this machine at the end because I could tell you, but they're better at it. They made the thing, so yeah, my name is John Pearson. I work at a company called Parallax Team. We're a BIM consultant based out of Dallas, Texas, and I build a lot of tools for Dynamo and Revit. I'm also an Autodesk Expert Elite, which is pretty cool. It means that I get in trouble a lot. No, I'm just kidding. No, it just means that I really nerd out on Revit things. So I always teach Revit classes at these events. I used to do all the certification exams. I think they're still doing them this year. I'm not sure. They're not? Okay. I saw some shaking heads. Bummer. But yeah.
They're revamping the exam, so I think that's why they had to take a break.
Okay. They're revamping the exam, so study up. That MEP one was a beast when I had to take it. And yeah, so if you use that, who all is a Dynamo user in here? Yes, my people. Who all is an AutoCAD user in here? You could leave. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's a joke. My badge says I love AutoCAD, so that way we're still friends. Yeah, so I also run a site called Design Tech Unraveled, where all of the stuff I do at Parallax as a consultant, building Revit plugins, Dynamo graphs, Revit content, things like that, I help teach people that through YouTube or tutorials online or things like that. I really love sharing. One of my favorite quotes that's on my site is, the more generous you are, the bigger your world gets. I started coming to AU in 2014. I didn't know what Dynamo was. I knew Revit. And from there, I have many really great friends. Some of you are in here that we always meet up at these things and catch up from these events. So I really believe in sharing what you know. So the whole topic for this class or course or session, whatever you want to call it, is to design, create, and share. And when Lenovo and Intel sent me this machine, they were like, hey, what do you do that's tough on machines? And I'm like, oh, let me tell you, I run all sorts of things. All this stuff gets ran all the time. You might recognize some of the icons, you might not. Generative design's up there. Generative design is right over here. We have DaVinci Resolve. Who uses DaVinci Resolve if you edit videos? It's free. It's freaking awesome. You don't have to give Adobe any money, so that's awesome. They have a paid version too, though, so if you want to do more, get that one. Dynamo, Visual Studio, Revit. NVIDIA Broadcast, working from home. NVIDIA has an awesome tool that removes background noises for you on all these Zoom calls. Freaking awesome, and this has the GPU that does that, which is sweet. Twinmotion, big announcement for Twinmotion while we've been here. Who all's a Twinmotion user? Well, I was going to use Twinmotion once it's integrated, yeah. It's a sweet rendering software for Revit. And even more importantly, I run the craziest app that drains life from me all the time, Microsoft Teams. More of a joke, and also Chrome. I didn't add Chrome in here, but yeah. So we're going to look at a few things. We're going to look at Visual Studio, Dynamo, and Revit. We'll look at some Twinmotion as well with a direct link. But we're going to do a workflow today that works with ceiling tiles. My specific workflow is regarding lay-in ceiling tiles. Who all is a contractor in here? General contractors, so architects. All right, MEP, got some MEP, which is really good. There are workflows for generative design for MEP. You just have to kind of know where to look for them. This workflow is really interesting because you can take a space, run an algorithm on it, and minimize the cut panels on the perimeter of the room to reduce costs, material waste, things like that. For me, I really like this workflow because I used to work in an architecture firm, and we do raised flooring all the time, that concrete raised flooring with the pedestals. Those are expensive, and they're very, very hard to model unless you want to spend a few days just clicking and shaping all these things. I didn't have this workflow 6 years ago or whatever it was, so I was the one in the seat placing all those things. This is a Dynamo graph. The data set is available on the Dynamo blog. So there's a blog post that corresponds to this workflow. So this data set will be on there. And what we're doing is we're creating a surface and we're actually going to build it as a sloped glazing in Revit. Who else use sloped glazing? Not enough people. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use sloped glazing, which is technically a roof, and we're going to build actual grids and panels that have quantities to them. The ceiling tool in Revit sucks because the surface patterns, you can't see them anywhere else. You go into Navisworks or something and those go away. So now your contractor is trying to coordinate all these things and they don't have those lines anymore because you had them in Revit as a pattern and you're happy, right? So their problem now, right? So if you model it as something like model lines, which I really like more than sloped glazing, that helps them quite a bit as well. And that's doable with Dynamo too. This one's sloped glazing because, once again, they told me test the machine, and I was like, well, it kicks the crap out of MS Paint. Let me throw this at it now. So, yeah. So this handout is in you'll have this too, but all the inputs that we have, this isn't a super technical session, so all the graphs are available with all the notes. But essentially, we take a few inputs, we can run that algorithm and get an output that is pretty remarkable. So this workflow, you can also do randomization. So generative design, a lot of the time, I run workflows that just create cool shapes and all sorts of random stuff. We're able to do that, but if we take it a little bit further, we are able to start to optimize as well by iterating a lot. So in this case, we can see what kind of areas we're dealing with partials, discarded, and pick the one that's wasting the least amount of resources, which is really nice. This is also useful for landscape, for brickwork, and things like that. This is a really adaptable workflow in that way, and it's a really kind of fun one too. Who else used generative design? I guess I didn't ask that, did I? Couple? Anyone want to shout out a reason why you haven't used it yet? Volunteers? Is it intimidating? It was intimidating to me. So when I first was introduced to generative design in Revit, it showed up in my ribbon. I didn't ask for it, it just appeared, right? And they show all the buildings changing shape and stuff. And I'm like, we can lay out viewports on a sheet optimized with this tool. We can move room tags optimized, things like that. So it's good for a whole lot of other things that aren't just design related. Generative design is interesting because Revit is single-threaded, so it's running in that one process. So if you can have the fastest processor possible with all these cores and you're using one in Revit, Revit's like that. He's at the back, they're at the back cheering them on like, go, and all the other processors just hanging out drinking coffee, you know? So that's kind of how Revit is. Generative design runs 6 instances of Dynamo in the background to optimize these things. So it's really remarkable that it passes it off that way and hands it off for us to be able to run these things in the background. So that's what I really like about it, is the fact that we can do things that Revit can't necessarily do unless like you're in a shaded view for multi-processing or something. Yeah, so it's really cool. Dynamo Sandbox as well is multi-threaded, so not in Revit. That way you can run all of these things really fast, which is great. So we'll go ahead and jump right in Revit here, and we're going to just look at a few things. So this is a sample model that I have. It's just an office floor from a client of mine. We ripped out our office floor. They let me do that, so we're good. Because I didn't want to just open the sample model for this. I wanted to kind of show something that's a little more realistic. So for generative design, under the Manage tab, we actually have access to generative design in a panel. It comes with your Autodesk subscription. Like I said, you didn't ask for it, but you got it. It's pretty cool. That sounds a little mean, but it's pretty cool that it's in there. And whenever we want to create a study, we're able to do that pretty quickly. So what we'll do is we'll create one from scratch. So it looks very similar to Dynamo Player, if you've ever used Dynamo Player as well, where you can fire off Dynamo scripts in a UI very similar to this. This is in Revit 23, so we get all this really nice UI with the image and everything like that. Clicking on it surfaces all of these inputs. So if you've ever opened Dynamo in here, we had a few hands. It's a little intimidating with all those wires everywhere, right? A little bit. I get intimidated. I've been fighting with Dynamo for close to 8 years now, you know. So when you open this, you're able to start to see all these inputs just really surface in a nice way for users. So in this case, we have like, some of these you won't pay so much attention to because they do the optimization, but you pick a ceiling or a floor level, you pick a surface. In this case, I'm picking the floor that defines the room, very similar to what we're in right now with the dividing. I think it's one whole floor for this example, so probably not the best, but we're okay. And then you can define a constant. So when this graph was originally created, we had it to where it'll tell you what tile size fits really well in the room. In my case, I know I want a 2x4 tile. Let's see how that works. The great thing is you can also run a 2x2 study and see which one costs less, which is really cool. This one's very oriented to that cost savings as well. We can tell it to maximize how many full tiles we have and tell it to minimize partial tile count and partial tile area and the discarded area, what's getting thrown away in a landfill. So what's really nice with this is we are doing something called a multi-objective optimization. So what we're doing is we're feeding it all this data that a designer or someone working in Revit has to look at it and go, let's shift this a little and count all the tiles. Let's shift this a little, things like that. Everyone kind of following along with that process, right? Having to move these things manually and lay them out. I know a lot of times you just do the ceiling tool and place it and just move on with your life. But when you're on the contracting side or something, you do need to be a little more finite with these things. So with this, we're able to go ahead and click generate. And you have some settings here to tell it how many times to run. This is like a super technical bit. I generally leave it the same, but you could bump this up and really go nuts. We do have some of the generative design team from Autodesk in here. They're at this table back here. So bug them if you want to know more how it works. And we'll go ahead and hit generate. So right now, like I said, it is running 6 instances of Dynamo in the background. And it's pretty quick. It's pretty snappy. So if I were to try to just break this machine, I'm just kidding. We can actually see. If it crashes, we're just going to leave. You can actually see all of these things called REST Dynamo Core running in the background really quickly. There is 6 instances of them. So Dynamo is really great, and you can kind of hear the fan kick on a little right now, because now it's chugging through, and it's like, give me all that data, and let me see what I could do with it, right? One of my favorite posts for generative design that I've done recently is regarding laying out viewports on a sheet. So you can actually do the same process with a sheet in Revit, lay out all the viewports and get a bunch of options. And they make sense. My version starts from the bottom left and works around. I've seen previous versions that shoves a bunch of views on a sheet. As long as they all fit, it doesn't care, and they're all stacked everywhere. With Revit 22 and up, we actually have access to viewport APIs now for the view title. So it also does the view title really nice for you, which is sweet. So that's go check out that workflow on the dynamobim.org/blog, because that one's really nice as well. So let's see. So within this tool, within generative design, we are able to make this full screen, get a preview from Dynamo of what we're going to get. Yellow is a discarded tile, blue is a whole tile. As we click through, we can start to see all the options that have been generated for us and kind of use some of our assumptions here of what's aesthetically pleasing or what just looks ridiculous or something like that. With a different shape space, it does generate more options. But we can also start to filter these down really well as well. So for this discarded area or partial tile area, we can start to minimize that by just highlighting that in the graph on the bottom. So that graph, we can start to isolate these solutions really quickly. So with generative design, we're able to do that and start to facilitate that change as well. So with this, it's all great, right? It's in a window, pretty colors, all that good stuff. But the power with generative design really comes from this button right here called Create Revit Elements. By the way, that little highlight thing, that's from a tool called Windows Power Toys, which is freaking awesome. And it's great when you're presenting to be able to isolate things. So make sure you install that as well. There's a lot of other cool things in there too. So we'll go ahead and do, I need to select an outcome. And if we hit Create Revit Elements, Revit's still a little weird when you're in a perspective view, so I switched to a default 3D. And if we jump back, we now see there is a sloped glazing with individual tiles and individual T-grids in this room. So I just placed a whole lot of ceiling tiles really quickly in this room with that algorithm that ran in the background. Is that pretty cool? Yeah? Question? So the T-grids, so the question was, on the T-grids, is it just default sizes or what's going on? This is a sloped glazing, so that's a curtain wall mullion, and I just modeled a T-grid type mullion just based on a spec sheet that I had. So if I can't isolate a mullion without isolating the hosts. But with that, if I hover, you kind of see the blue outline. So you can model that whatever type you want, add nest, whatever profiles you want in it as well. I used to use curtain wall for laying out stadium seating all the time too. Curtain wall and sloped glazing, ignore what the tool's called. Just do what you want. It's all right. Like, you pay for the software, just do whatever you want. What's remarkable about this is I'm working in Revit and it's pretty fluid, right? Like, it's not bogging. My computer doesn't currently sound like an air fryer making chicken tenders, right? That's pretty cool. I think it's cool. I had a computer before that it not only cooked chicken thighs, it cooked my thighs when I was using it. So come on, guys. So it's running all right at the same time, but at the same time, I'm running Twinmotion in the background with a direct sync to where I can actually update a live rendering right outside of this tool on this one machine. So the Datasmith add-in is awesome for Twinmotion because you can just connect right to it and synchronize, and we should see that ceiling start to appear as well here in a moment. But this has been running the whole presentation. Like, in the past when I'm running tools, I tend to run like 5 instances of Revit just in case one decides to crap out on me, I can jump to another one. And in the past, that's always a little scary. And this one I'm running 2 sessions of Revit, Visual Studio, Chrome, Brave. Use Brave, don't use Chrome. Brave's nicer. And I'm also running generative design and all of these things at once. I think Teams is open. Like, I joked, but I think it always opens, even if I don't want it to, right? All of this at that same time is running, and then I have this nice rendering starting to run. It's not all the way finished. I only added some materials real quick for this demo, but we are getting that direct link starting to go. In the description for this, I think, I'll tweet it later too. There's a blog post that I wrote about how I used to present designs to clients for this session. And has anyone ever heard of Origin PC? I'll just throw a name out there. It's a little box that it used to have an NVIDIA Titan in it years ago. It was a sweet machine. I went to so many client meetings where I had a rolly cart like they buy for groceries, and I had that freaking machine in that cart every time going to client meetings and having to hook it up. So like things like this being able to run now are just really pretty neat to me because I was the one rolling around downtown Albuquerque with a $7,000 computer in tow. So now it's in my backpack and I could run a little faster with this if I have to. Make sure you take Ubers back to your hotel. So that's processing still. This is updating all of that grid, so that is going to take a moment as well. But that's one thing that I find really interesting with this linking of all these things is not only am I running all these generative design workflows really quickly in Revit, I'm able to have like confidence to be able to run all this stuff at once without a crash, hopefully. So far, this has been working really great for me with the 12th gen processor and all that good stuff. At Parallax, we actually are adopting that same processor in all of our machines just because we're mobile and do so many different things as well. In addition to this updating, I am debugging a Visual Studio instance. So who all codes in here? Like actual codes, Revit programs or Dynamo nodes? A little bit. Visual Studio is a code editor, so I'm actually also debugging a plugin live in Revit 22 while we're doing this. So yeah, pretty fun. Specifically, I'm in this model I've been working really hard on for this session. Like, I made this model just for this. Come on. This is an advanced sample model, and it's actually debugging a tool. This is another contractor-based thing that lets you create 3D room tags on all your room to be able to view them in Navisworks. So it's debugging this thing right now, like I said, and if I were to hit run, I still have Twinmotion running. I still have generative design running. I still have Chrome running. All this stuff's running. Like, Maybe it's giving me too much confidence. I have another session on Thursday, and let's see what happens in that one, right? You better be in there so I could complain. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, this is running. This is placing in every room in the model a 3D room tag that tells you what room it's in. So if we go ahead and hit close on this, and we'll orient to a plan view, this one, we'll actually see that we have 3D room tags that allow you to do some of those coordination things like in Navisworks. This is based off a Dynamo graph that I have, or Dynamo node I have in a package called Rhythm that I make. So if you've ever heard of Rhythm, I'm the guy that makes that. There's community contributions as well, which is really awesome. So part of that sharing piece. But this is based on that, and it actually updates all those room tags and all that good stuff. I mentioned I'm debugging it, and you saw that it said 3D room tags on the window. So what's cool with Visual Studio now is if I just say, like, let's put this in my pocket, hello from AU or something. Visual Studio 2022 has this hot reload feature. So as you're building code, you're able to start to just force reload that right into the program as well. On other machines, that's ran pretty slow for me, actually. So that's what's been really cool is, like, while we're building tools, I'm impatient just by nature, I think. I'm very, like, I want that feedback right away. That's why I like Dynamo so much, because you place nodes and just start getting things to happen. You're able to debug and make changes to your code live in Revit now, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of coders in here, but as you get into it, I encourage you to look at things like Visual Studio 2022 and up, which is really fun. So you saw that update live. Another thing, let's see if this updated. Oh man, my chairs are lights now. Woo! That's fun. I don't know what happened. What's great about this is that I'll make them wood. So you just drag all your materials on. If you don't have twin motion, give it a shot. It really is fun. And it sounds like, I had another class during the keynote, but it sounds like we're going to get access to some really cool stuff here pretty soon in it. So that's really exciting. And all these material libraries are included. Twinmotion now has a mapper. So if you're in Revit, you can actually map your material name to a Twinmotion material name. That way when that link happens, you don't get glowing chairs. So I haven't done that process on this model, but that is doable as well. They have all sorts of great stuff in here. We can make the ceiling grass too, so that's fun. And it's really responsive. You can export to EXE, that way someone can run it on their machine and all that good stuff. I wanted to show Twinmotion just because it's running really fast on this thing, which is pretty cool. Pretty neat, I hope. Yeah, a little bit of like, what the heck, I just came for lunch, right? But yeah, that's kind of some of those workflows that we're doing. You can kind of hear the fans going a little bit, which is cool. But yeah, it's been really interesting seeing all of these things run very quickly. Like I said, I have another Dynamo presentation on Thursday. I'll probably have 3 instances of Revit open, and I'm not going to freak out, hopefully, because if one bogs down, I'll just pop open another one, and we should be good. Sometimes that doesn't pan out for me. Are there any questions about anything regarding any of these workflows? So the question was, or the comment was, you haven't mentioned Python. Do you use Python much at all? So in Rhythm, there are a few Python nodes. My Dynamo journey started out in 2013. I opened Dynamo for the first time, and then all the nodes turned yellow and red. So I'm not a programmer by training. I'm actually technically a drafter, and then I started to learn programming and went from there. So in 2013, I opened Dynamo, and all of it turned red and yellow, and I was like, I'm never going to learn this. This is impossible. How stressful is this tool? And I still feel that way a lot. And in 2014, I attended Marcelo's class at Autodesk University, Dynamo for Dummies, and I'm like, I'm a dummy, I'll learn it. So that helped make that connection for me. In 2015, I started sharing Rhythm as a package with custom nodes, and then I started working in Python at that point as well. I learned Python right in Dynamo, but there have been a few other people that say learn Python first. I'm a Revit user. I want to use it in Revit. I want to see stuff happen. That's how I am. So I just started using it by dissecting packages like Clockwork, which is a custom package, Archilab, Spring nodes. Those aren't mine, so all those are different people. Once again, that community. Archilab is Conrad. He's here at the BIM booth. Clockwork is a guy named Andreas. He's really great and shares everything as well. And just you can dissect all of what they're doing. I mentioned I teach and have courses. I actually have a Python course as well that teaches how I learned Python, and it's a video course on my website. I won't get super salesy. It is a paid course, but I also do videos on YouTube that teach you how to build some of these nodes too. So my website's designtechunraveled.com, and then we can talk after too. But regarding specs of this machine, I'm going to go ahead and invite Rajul and Jacob up to talk about that a little bit as well, because I could talk all day about Dynamo and Revit and make the fans go off, but let's let them talk a little bit about what's inside of this thing that's now currently spinning a fan very fast. And I think they have a video they want me to play as well. And then I'll stick around after I answer questions, by the way.